Leslie, can you hear us?
It's not recording yet. So.
Yeah, it's not. Light's not on.
That is. What does that mean? She can't hear us until it records.
Yeah, she can't hear us until
There.
there. Now it's on. Okay, Leslie, can you hear us now? Leslie, can you hear us? Might have to work on that.
Yeah, I know she's here.
Okay.
Voice,
Yes.
Razga,
Yes.
Smith. Yes.
Okay, next item then is public comment period. If anybody wanted to come up to the podium here and make any comments, you're welcome to do so. Seeing nobody moving, we'll go on to the consent agenda. We have 4 items here, claims for January 31st as well as February 15th, financials from December, and then minutes from our last board meeting. Let's do claims first. Any questions on those items?
Yeah, I have one question. I mean, it's not I'm just kind of curious more than anything. It says Scott Felton project.
That was a repair over there on some underground.
Electrical underground?
Yeah, electrical underground. Yep.
That's all.
Okay, on financials, is Chris back there? Yeah, do you want to make any comments or?
No comments other than, I think while I was gone, Robert was here and presented the budget. So we are working on entering those audit entries and getting those up to date, which are reflected in this December financial report as well as the budget.
Very good. Other questions from board on that item? And minutes, any questions on minutes?
I did have, wasn't it at our last meeting that we had the solar presentation? I couldn't remember the name of the gentleman that did the presentation. It wasn't in the minutes, and I wondered if that should be reflected.
Oh. Was that last time? 2 times ago.
Well, that's why I asked that. I was thinking, the bigger group came in and we had questions.
I think that might, I don't remember us.
For the reason the meeting.
But Chris, can you touch on that for us?
I know.
Hey, Leslie, can you hear us yet? Yeah.
It looks like she does have a mute button up there. There's not the red thing that's on front of her.
Can we call?
Yeah, we've done that. Okay, just to keep going on consent agenda items, any other questions? And if not, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda items, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed?
Can anybody hear me? I can't hear anything.
Can't hear us.
The audio's off.
Text her.
I did. She's fine. I asked if she could hear us, but she didn't.
Yeah, I'm checking on it. They said that it showed the audio was connected and working, but I'm gonna just verify that again.
She jumped off.
Oh.
I think it's that we have her on the phone. We don't really get her recording.
Should get picked up by the.
She's back again.
Can you hear us, Leslie?
You want to just call her? Yeah, put her on speaker.
We can call her from this phone. That way she can hear everybody.
Oh,
You don't have
yeah.
to do it on a cell phone.
Hello?
Hi, Leslie. Hear us at all?
No.
We can. You're almost, well, you're at stereo right now because I've got you in here, but I'm not sure what's going on.
Muted me.
I'll call her on this.
Okay, we're gonna call you on here in the room so you can have better sound. All right. Let's talk to you in a bit. Bye. But the host just muted or whatever that was.
That play.
Who's playing, who's managing it?
The host is muted.
Oh.
You gotta fix it, stand. Holy smokes.
Well, it always is I couldn't get it to stand right.
It's a government issue.
No, I knew that I would take grief over this.
20.
That's not, I have yours, should I?
Yes, this is.
This is Leslie.
Hi Leslie, it's Jackie, you're on in the council chambers.
I don't forget.
I don't use mine. Yeah, I try mine. You're welcome to it.
Okay, now can you hear us, Leslie?
I can.
Good, and I think we counted you as present,
I did,
right?
yes.
Yeah, okay. And we've gone ahead and approved the consent agenda items, so I'll give you a chance, Leslie, if you have any questions or comments on those items before we move on.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, then we'll move on to electric utility information items. Mike.
Not a whole lot, just that turbinate valve, they're still doing, they found some issues with it down there, so it'll be a couple, 3 weeks before they get all the parts and pieces and get that fixed, so hopefully get that back soon. And otherwise, it's just our normal maintenance on equipment this time of year.
Very good. And water utility information items.
I got a little presentation I'd like to pop up and I'll try it. Here, everyone wouldn't mind, maybe hit the lights because you can see the screen better unless it's.
I've been looking forward to this all day.
This is an overall view of the water system here, and the different colors represent the size of the water mains. With the yellow being the 8-inch, which is the majority of our mains in town. Our goal is to get rid of all of the, the brown, which is 4-inch, which doesn't provide any fire protection, and some of our heavy maintenance items, 6-inch mains. So we've got 13.5 miles of 4-inch main, and we got 14 miles of 6-inch main. And then the rest of our 60 some miles is 8, 10, and 12-inch main, and some 20. The green is a 20-inch main coming from the water facility up and feeding the town, which is put in 70. Which shows the size. One of the reasons, well, this is like a picture of the east side. Here, this area here, small water main. There's so many failures here on this between Euclid and Franklin, you can't even see the water main. Several failures here. The blue dots that you see are double failures, where we had to cut out sections of main because a wraparound or a repair clamp wouldn't work. So we've got, different, you can see the failures on this, and the majority of them are on the 4 or the 6-inch mains, which is standard in most because they're the older ones. West side, similar to the same thing. You have, this area is one of our high priority that we want to get fixed here. We've had several failures on it, and we actually had 2 more this January on this section here. So it's just, and then what's ironic is you can see the blue dot there and the blue dot here. We took out one section of main, and you wouldn't believe the failure. The inside was just crusted in a high amount of scale. We went up another couple hundred feet, cut in a new valve up in this area here, and no scale. It was like laid at the same time, same week, 2 different mains. So you never can tell what kind of product you're going to get. Obviously, they're 1960s. We haven't laid any 6-inch or 4-inch mains since the 60s. All the 8-inch and the 10 and the 12 we've laid, but that was standard on most towns that you see. So, we come down here, like say several before, then they put another development in and went up to a 6-inch, but still the same amount of failures. Like I say, which is one of the reasons that, you know, our main reason to have a rate increase to get be a little bit more proactive on getting these taken care of. Otherwise, like I say, just a quick overview. The system is really, we rate high as far as insurance, and because we've done some strategic main that were laid in. You know, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but every single school in the system and the college had 4-inch mains around them up until the 90s. Now, we've made a concerted effort to get water mains increased around all of our elementary schools, with the exception of Wilder, because it's newer. But Whittier, Emerson, Irving, the high school, all had smaller mains. And now all the schools and the college have big fire productive mains, between not the 500 gallon a minute hydrants, but the 3,000 gallon a minute hydrants around them. And we're doing the same on the square, the streetscape. We're getting rid of all of our small mains around, and we're circling at least a block around the outside of the square too, to get rid of those, you know, 19, 20, 4-inch mains. Have any questions? I just want not to take too much of your time,
So,
just to say.
On the, this is really great. It's a great to have this visual. Are there any patterns where you have, other than they're just old? Is it?
Some are not so much old. We found that Des Moines Waterworks did a study on it and said that a lot of their water mains in the Des Moines area, and they contacted other cities that were put in the 50s, are failing because the best iron was used to fight the war effort and to repair after the war effort. So they got ineffective, or, you know, the inferior product. So that we've noticed that, you know, and you never can tell. You might, in the same, like say, same stretch of main, have a main that looks just, outside looks clean as could be, inside looks clean as could be, and then you go a couple hundred feet and it's just pitted, calcified in. You just never know. But like I say, that just to give you an overview here, just of what we have coming down, and we're one of the many cities that experiencing the same thing. You know, we average about 30 main breaks a year. We had one year there, 2012, where we had 62. It was really huge. But everybody in that year had several more than what their average. So
Are you running on the average this year? Or
we're running on average this year. Yep, we did. We had a 10-week stretch where we did fine, and then, you know, last few weeks why we got dinged with 8. So
Can you repeat how many miles we have on the 8 and above?
on the 8 and above, there's 34.5 miles. I've got that, Lori, and I
Is
can
that in
send
here?
that to you.
Okay.
I don't know if I put it in or not. I had to I wanted to readjust those numbers just to make sure. But
Would you mind sending that to us?
I will send that to you. Yeah, and that's our greatest amount. You know.
So do you have a goal, Lou, how many of those you place each year?
Well, you know, in the last 11 years, we've worked with the city on 8 of those 11 years on when they replaced the streets and did sanitary and storm sewer, we replaced the water main. So we've been kind of working that system out, and then doing it, like say, 4 years where we, like last year, we were able to do a project for home. We've done it 3 years where we were able to, and we're hoping, because like the street's fine, sewer's fine, like in this area. Obviously, there's no fire protection, and you can't, like say, several failures on that. So we would definitely like, in, you know, after streetscape, after we get done with streetscape, go after this side, these technical areas, and like say up here, K Street in there, Ashland, 4th, 5th Street, several failures on all those sections of town. But at the end of the world, we got good valves. We're shutting off an average of 2 to 3 blocks when we do have a main break. And areas that we find that we have a valve that isn't working properly and we have to shut off 5 or 6 blocks, and we put it on the list, we go in and we cut in new valves and try to get it down to just having a couple blocks or 2 to 3 blocks on all all failures. So,
So Lou, you mentioned the schools and the college. Any of the multifamily dwellings, would that be considered a place that
we have right there by Irving School, that 72-plex that used to be privately owned that the college uses for dorms now, that had a 4-inch main in front of it with no fire protection. We put a new 8-inch main down to that point so they would have fire protection, a block right in front of the facility and a block away. We have done a few of those bigger, but most of the time when bigger facility is built now, they have to be sprinkled. They have to have that, those big mains. So it's a requirement of ours that they do. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to fight the fire.
So places like the Village probably have.
Village, yes, definitely. And we've got a meeting tomorrow afternoon with the Village. They're going to expand on it. It's quite an expansion they're talking about. And they want to put a building right on top of our water main. So we're going to be in on that discussion on, either needing a tunnel going through on Robin Glen from East Street to Robin Glen right by Stephen Court. And then several duplexes and stuff. It's quite an expansion they're talking about there. So keeping their fire protection at the maximum will be a serious point of conversation tomorrow on that. Otherwise, it is just to give you a little, one of the reasons why we want to upgrade and continue. We're upgrading, don't get me wrong, be a little more aggressive. So,
And Blue, question for you. So I was under the impression that most, if not all of our water mains were under the streets. Is that not necessarily?
Not necessarily true. Most of them in Indianola were put in the parking. The engineer, the previous city fathers, gas main was in one parking, water main was in the other parking, sewer in the middle, and then the electric and everybody else was overhead.
And by parking, is that like the right of way
between the
street and
sidewalk and the curb is a majority of our. Now some aren't, but most of ours are in the parking, except for intersections and whatnot.
And does that mean then that we wouldn't necessarily have to tear up the street to replace those, or how does that?
To replace, it all depends on how many other utilities are in the way.
Okay.
When we did the A Street project here, which is, excuse me, let me get back, which is right here going north, right here going north, that was in the parking and everything was right there. So we actually went and squeezed it over, clear over by the sidewalk and bored it in. So we have enough room to fix it, but it's very crowded. But we had in the street, there was just a lot of shell. The streets got issues and stuff where it's just not good soils. And we didn't want to go there with it, when we had everything soil tested. Okay, so our ultimate goal is to get somewhere closer, like when we do the West Boston project here, which that'll go in front of council here when they get the engineer checked out, the D Street to F Street, and then some F Street, excuse me, that'll be put back in the parking.
So on new developments, do you follow that same strategy?
Yes, most definitely. We want to be in the parking so we can work on it in an easier fashion. And, because not usually, let me take that back. Always, the utilities are put in first on every development. Your water, your sewer, your storm, and then they pour the streets. So they know just exactly where we want to go and that kind of thing.
And so I agree with Lori. This is extremely helpful and very interesting to see. And so if you overlay this with the water mains with like the sewer lines and stormwater lines, do they have similar issues on the city side with the size of those lines?
No, because the standard sewer size is 6-inch dumping into an 8 or 12-inch trunk line. So the house taps and everything, it's not a constant where it has to have that flow. There's a sporadic, but it has to be able to handle every home, but the chance of it running, at the same time are not as much. I mean, they don't have a problem with flows coming up.
What about the condition of that?
The condition is similar to ours. They have several in their capital improvement that they want to, and the driving force of this project that we're going to do this Boston is a bad sanitary sewer line, so you just never can tell on that. It could be tree roots, it could be poor installation. They've shifted over, they broke, and then the thing about that sewer is most time between 8 and 14, 15 foot deep, so it's a more costly adventure to do that.
How deep are ours?
Ours is usually between 5 and 7, in most cases. Now this section here on A Street that we did there, they had it was similar to Hillcrest Avenue where they had a street that didn't have any curb and gutter, and they had dips on both sides of the street. So the water would run down. Well, then they filled in the ditch, and then the water main went from being 6 foot deep to being 10 foot deep. Yeah, so, and then that's the one we had 20 lane breaks on, and it was everything, and yeah, very dangerous for my guys to be down in there working on it. So anyway, that's that's all I have on that.
And this is admittedly hard to see, and I'd encourage you guys, if you, have questions, just go to make an appointment with Lou and he'll.
Yeah, I have, we have this all on our system, and I can go block to block to block to show you. And I can show you service lines, hydrants, gate valves. We have different layers, and we're working on it constantly trying to get that upgraded. But we're just the same way with Mike and Kurt and wastewater and storm and stuff on getting stuff on maps.
Thanks, Lou. Very
Thanks.
interesting. Do you have other information?
No, that's enough for me.
What is different?
Okay, I believe we are on to communications utility action items. We got several items related to the fiber extension project. The first item is to open a public hearing on the plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the fiber extension to the water resource recovery facility project. So I'll go ahead and open that public hearing. Anybody that would like to speak is welcome to come up. Seeing no one moving, we will close the public hearing and move on to the resolution related to adopting those same plans, specs, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the fiber extension to the water resource recovery facility project. Kurt or Chris, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I can just give a brief overview. This is a 7,860 foot fiber extension from R63 on 103rd Avenue North of town to Grimes Street, and then back east on Grimes Street to the water recovery facility. The engineer's estimate for the full project was $115,000 and $115,016. So
you mentioned the contract that was included is for that piece of work.
Yep.
It was a pretty lengthy contract.
Yep.
There was a lot there, isn't there?
In our language, are there any things in there, just how you're on the way in, any items in there that you would call our attention to? No. Anything that would be a little bit of a unique kind of a situation? Anything that concerns you?
not that I can tell or see in there. No, actually, this contract is really probably more designed for a much larger project. In all reality, once we start this project, it's probably going to be over in 2 weeks. It's not going to take that long to put this in. So a lot of those forms in there that you see, this would be for a much larger project if you're requesting funds on a regular basis. So, yeah.
And would you understand?
I said our people like it.
But no, it should be good. New company together for us, and they've certainly done good work for us in the past.
So just to clarify, I'll make sure, so that's going from R63, and I forget whatever the road that is, and then eventually turns into Grimes. 103rd, and then it Grimes is down to the treatment plant.
Correct. Yep.
I thought once upon a time we were talking about it coming a different route, but anyway, I could be confused.
No, that's the shortest one. There is it's 100. I always get that next road on Hoover. Is that 110th? Anyway, there's that north, that as you're coming west past the existing sewer plant, that first road that goes back to the north. We could have also gone that way, but the terrain wasn't near as good, and it's actually a longer path.
And not as many houses.
Yeah. So it worked out better to go up on 103rd there. So
And then we've talked about this in the past, but can you remind us on funding?
Yeah, there is no funding in place for that right now. As far as the state grant level is, I'm still waiting on contracts from the state. The update today was hopefully by March 1st, but the state is running behind. So I don't know exactly when we're going to see those. But as far as this section right now, the city has budgeted dollars to help with that. They've set aside $60,000 to help put this in. That will allow them to keep their dark fiber rates at the same rate that they pay now. So.
And the grant, how much was that gonna be for?
Yeah, I didn't bring the grant dollars with me because that also will include back on R63 Hoover and then up on, again, 110th or 108th or whatever it is over there. So.
But the grant dollars are actually multiple projects, not just this.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
got it.
Yeah. So.
Can you remind me, Kurt, how you arrived at 60,000 for the city?
Yeah, we took a look at those numbers. Chris and I sat down and worked out what we were going to get for revenue off the dark fiber to run that direction with the miles that they're going to have. We looked at a 5-year payback on those dollars, and $60,000 put us at that number. So we can expect payback off the money that we put into it in about 5 years. So.
Thank you.
Little item that I liked that you had the photos of the boxes in there, because I recall we had some issues with boxes not being wired very well, or the fiber, they were kind of a bird's nests.
Yep.
So those are for illustration to say this is our expectation.
Exactly. So yeah, it's all there. Newcomb did a very nice job on this packet. So yes.
Okay, so this resolution is just to adopt the plan specs in the formal contract. The next resolution will be to actually select the vendor. Correct with that. So is there motion on this first resolution? So I have a motion and a second. This is roll call, isn't it, Jackie?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Board Member Smith,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Forbush,
Yes.
Voigt,
Yes.
Rosga.
Yes.
Okay, that resolution is approved. Now we'll move on to the resolution to award the construction contract.
So we sent this packet out for bid on January 11th. Bids were due back on February 7th. We received 7 bids from companies, so a very good return. Companies in Iowa, Wisconsin, Oklahoma bid on the project. The low bid for the full project was $96,755.80, which was $18,260.20 below the engineer estimate, or just shy of 16%. So we got some good bids in. The low bid was to Murphy Communications, Murphy Tower. We've had the pleasure of working with those folks before on previous road board projects. They've been very good and very responsive in the past. So a good company to work for. So my recommendation is to award the construction contract to Murphy Tower Service, doing business as Murphy Communications, in the amount of $96,755.80.
And can you clarify that the base bid amount is lower than that and then the total?
Yeah, we originally, we bid this out a couple different ways because we weren't exactly sure where numbers were going to come in with everything going on right now. Items number 7, 8, and 9, pulling the fiber in, splicing and testing is something that we could do in-house if we needed to. However, with the numbers coming in where they are, I think it makes more sense to have Murphy do that and have our guys continue to do installs. Otherwise, I've got to pull my guys off for time to do that. So
your recommendation is to do the full amount of
Correct.
$96,755?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions or comments from the board on that?
No, I'd say good job. It looks well put together, and there are actually several good bids there.
And I'm pleased to see that they're under the estimates. That's pretty rare that we
Yeah.
get that anymore.
yeah, hopefully. And my hope is, if we can keep some of these future projects kind of to this scale, we'll be able to get some of those smaller companies that are hungry for some of this stuff, and we'll be able to keep those dollars down. So, yeah, but we'll see.
Okay, I would entertain a motion then.
So moved.
Motion and a second, and this is roll call again.
Yes. Board Member Forbush,
Yes.
Voigt,
Yes,
Rosga,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
that resolution is approved. Nice job, Kurt.
Thank you.
And then other communication utility information items.
Yeah, I will not be at the next meeting, but just so you're all aware, we've awarded the contract now. The next step will be to get the signed contract from Murphy the bond put in place. So very likely that'll be on the next agenda just to approve all of that. At which point then we give them the notice to proceed as soon as the weather is good. So, but hopefully we can get all that buttoned up in the next couple of weeks. So.
And then you plan to do that work late spring or when will that?
Yeah, Rick would like to get that plant fired up in May, so we're really hoping to have this done by the end of April. So fingers crossed, the weather keeps kind of up in the 50s. We've still got 12, 14 inches of frost in the ground, but hopefully we'll see some more of the first part of March and we can get started in mid-March or early April. Like I said, I really think a couple weeks we'll take care of this. So. And then the other stuff we've got a short month with February with President's Day, and we took a couple days off for some conferences where we're still on pace to do 56 installs. And as I mentioned before, yeah, we're just kind of watching for that spring thaw. We've got about 45 temps on the ground right now. So once we get some thawing in the ground, we'll have to get back in and get conduit in the ground and spend some time getting those drops pulled back in before people start mowing over them. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So,
what's your lead time on?
Yeah, we're at about 2.5 weeks right now. So yeah, I'm hoping we can hold on to that. Like I said, once that temperature warms back up, we get Alberto back in town to get conduit in the ground for us. It'll take a little extra time there too, but I'm hoping we can maintain that 2.5 weeks. So.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. Okay, let's move on to combined electric, water utility, communication action items. We have the selection of the 2022 officers. We delayed this from a month ago. And so what I would suggest is we open it up to nominations for, and this is really for us to select the chair and the vice chair of this board. Any suggestions? Or I have a nomination if nobody else wants to.
You want me to?
Yeah, if you want.
So I would nominate Lori for chair and Deb for co-chair for the coming year.
Okay, any other nominations or comments related to that?
Lori, I just wanted to I guess, check with you a little bit because I know that you were concerned about your lack of training as a board member. Do you feel that the last couple of months you've gotten enough training that you feel comfortable being chair?
Well, I will tell you, I am comfortable being chair knowing I have all of you to reach out and help support me. So yes, I told Adam I would feel comfortable moving ahead.
And I've offered to support her, and I'm sure Mike as a past chair also, and Deb as a past chair we're all here for you.
So thank you.
Well, I just want to make sure she's comfortable.
I appreciate you asking.
You're welcome.
Yes, I am the rookie.
I think I got put into the chair role after like a year also, so I can relate.
I don't think that was a year.
Yeah, you might not have been. Yeah. Okay, we need to vote on this, right? But it can just be
And just for clarification, you said co-chair is Deb's nomination for co-chair or for vice chair?
If there's a difference, it will be whatever it needs to be.
we've normally done vice chair.
Okay.
What's the difference?
Co-chair would be kind of equal
Yeah.
level
Yeah, yeah.
shared,
Oh,
and vice chair would be kind of a first and a second. And the way we've
I'll be second.
done it is traditionally the vice chair is.
Do I need to officially change my?
No, you're fine.
All right.
It's just simple motions.
Just to finish my thought, traditionally, we've kind of designated whoever's in the vice chair would theoretically slide into the chair role after a year, sometimes 2 years.
I'm like skiing across.
You get cheated, actually.
I know.
I could wait on them.
So do we vote on this since you're voting for us?
Yes, so
You do?
what I think we can make it as simple as to vote in favor, say aye for Lori as chair, Deb as vice chair. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Were you gonna, did I not say that right or what?
No, you said it right. It just feels weird that
It
we're
just
voting
feels
for
weird
ourselves.
that
Yeah,
I'm
we're
voting for
voting.
myself.
Yeah, I've had that thought in the past too.
So
So,
whatever.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Dad, for taking
And
care.
And if it's okay, I will continue with this meeting and turn it over to Lori for future meetings. Okay, so then next we have combined utility informational items. And first, just to acknowledge both Mike Metcalf and Chris Longer, you've had family members, and so we just wanted to express our condolences to you for those family situations. We support you and know that those times are difficult. And then Chris, other information items.
Before we get into the budget presentations, just a update on our solar project. So I sent along the contract. I was expecting to hear this week back from Amy regarding that. I think she's reviewed that, had a couple of items we exchanged today. So expecting to have her feedback and in hand for the rest of the week, and likely if everything clears out, we'll have something to vote on here at our next meeting, moving that project forward.
Can I ask a couple questions before you move on with that? I know when we talked the last time, there was some legislation being kind of formed around distance from lot lines and those kinds of things. Have you heard anything more about that and what that might have as an impact to us?
That would, if something like that were to pass and on that effective date, that would complicate our project. Thus far, our IAMU is looking at that, and nothing has been proposed. As this week, 18th is the legislative funnel. Nothing's coming up. It looks like maybe that won't make it this go around.
And so we move ahead and something does come up, will they have language in there to talk about existing properties and how they'll handle that?
That's my expectation. Like anything else, there'll be grandfathered provisions. We'll continue to look at that, and our various legislative bodies are specifically IAMU is looking at that, and me was involved in some of those discussions with those folks, to oppose such activities.
Have we had conversations with our zoning commission to see if there's any concern from them?
They, I've talked with Charlie, and one of the things that we'll also, with as this contract's materializing, that solar installation is a permitted use at in our agricultural zoning district, but we do need to get run that process through the planning and zoning for that permitted use. So we'll, in parallel with this contract, have some work. We're going to be working with the planning and zoning to get that finalized. They don't expect any issues, as it's kind of a stated in statutory purpose. So it shouldn't.
And then I have one last question, I promise. Lou, you mentioned we had notified the tenant, and I just happened to, I didn't know who that tenant was, but I happened to have a conversation with Joe Reynolds earlier this last week, and she mentioned that it was them. Do we have a drop dead date we need to give them, or they just know?
Well, here's the thing, Lori, when I talked to Martin and Blake, Brandon, excuse me, we didn't know if things were gonna work
Right.
out, yet. The contracts weren't signed. So they were gonna, put the 30 acres in beans if it needed to be here this in April. Matter of fact, I talked to Brandon last Thursday and told him we're still confident that the contract's gonna be signed and everything's gonna be good. Well, he said in a very nice way, well, if it doesn't, you call me. So that's where we're at.
Well, I just didn't know if he's gonna move ahead with seed and insurance.
No,
and
no,
those things.
no. He, when I talked to Martin and told him, what the situation was, he says, okay, Lou, they were going to seed it down. They last couple of years it's been in beans. They want it to be hay, and that was, the rental agreement, but he didn't want to put the money in to seed it down,
Right.
if he wasn't going to.
Right.
be able to.
And so I just didn't know if there was a timing that we just need to get back to them and say, we know this is.
Well, I really couldn't get back with them until I know for sure, but I told them as soon as one way or the other, I would get a hold of them. And I have their numbers on speed dial.
Thank you.
And Chris, one question related to the attorney. So any showstoppers? Did Amy raise anything major, or is it just, kind of editing word changes?
Yeah, thus far, we haven't got into any of those details, but, she didn't call me in any sort of panicked mode, like, how is this? So I expect any of her comments to be pretty, pretty standard, or pretty, indicative of any lawyer's, analysis of the agreement.
And have you reached out to Waverly or some of the other people that are also looking at that contract?
Yeah, they're in the exact, we got the contract the exact same day, and so they're really in that exact same situation. Their attorneys are looking at those. We're gonna touch base as soon as our various attorneys have given us some feedback. I'll chat and see if there's any different or significant changes to those feedback, and we'll go from there. Okay, so we did, you spoke a little earlier about some of the family issues that had slowed some of our strategic planning preparation. So we were talked or hope to have that at this meeting. Expect to have that at the next meeting, just given those delays. Very understandable. Sent some emails earlier regarding Senate Study Bill 3087 proposed by Senator Garrett, and House Study Bill 692 proposed by Representative Bowden. I was asked to testify, and last week at the Capitol, Mayor Erickson and I were both in Senator Garrett's subcommittee regarding this. There were some favorable outcomes from that 3087 made that out of the local government subcommittee and is being considered by the full committee here shortly.
And it's a pretty minor change, but it's important. Can you just explain what the change is?
Yeah, the change would be a clarification. Currently, Chapter 388 is absent any specific language on how Board of Trustees should be treated the same or differently from other commissions, with the exception, interestingly enough, of planning and zoning. What this bill is proposing is to amend 388 to include this clarification that Chapter 88 trustee or 388 trustees would be subject to provisions, and I don't know the exact chapter, but they would be the same provisions that planning and zoning committee members are.
68 something, I think.
Yeah, would be removed under there. So it's not, it is, 10 words added to the end of the sentence, but I think that could be some important clarification. So that House Study Bill 692 will be considered this week, and I'm expecting to be asked to go up there and testify on the House side similarly.
They have a public hearing on Thursday, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Other than that, I just have a note that the Indiana Advocate was out at the wine shop chatting with Mike. They were there to kind of do a tour of the facilities, and they expressed their appreciation. Were appeared to be pretty impressed by the new facility, and spent some time talking with Mike about some of the going ons with the electric department. So it was a good opportunity to visit and maybe get some of the good IMU work publicized.
Good, that's great to hear. Chris, going back to the attorneys, what's the status of our sending an RFP out for that?
I have got I've got the RFP sitting on wait. I need to sit down and schedule out some times and dates and talk with a couple of attorneys about any of the other specifics they'd like to see in their so that
in the next couple of weeks, we'll have that RFP issued, but it's sitting on my desktop, ready to go as soon as I can get some details out of it.
So having them review it from a legal perspective, isn't that the group we're trying to look at possibly replacing?
Yeah, not from a legal perspective, from a legal perspective, sometimes there is some clarifications, seen RFPs that, they want some affidavits of legitimacy, lawyers
So
being
it's
lawyers.
about kind of the procedure, not so much about what we're trying to accomplish by.
Yeah, correct. The procedure for that or any, we'll talk to probably a couple of those if, if 2 weeks is more than sufficient time, like we got these ready and, I talked to a couple of qualified candidates and 2 weeks is good enough. Probably have a shorter RFP date. But if there's any doubt expressed, then given this is the timing, like closer, we really 2 weeks we can't do it, but in a month we can. Work those dates from that perspective.
And in terms of the firms that you plan to sell it to, do you have, I don't know that I need to know exactly what the names of the firms are, but do you have a list of who you're planning to send to and how many is it? How many firms is it?
Right now, just based upon some recommendations that I've talked about, it's going to go out to 5 firms. We'll also publicize it. Certainly, it's not going to be limited to just those 5 firms, but there are 5 firms that come with recommendations. So we're going to evaluate their backgrounds, but we'll post that out on the various websites and certainly going to entertain any offers on qualified firms that come in.
Anything else, Chris, before we move on to budgets?
That's
I have maybe one question, not related to anything you've already discussed, but Chris Longer, you mentioned the audit and getting some of those things documented and updated in the financials. One of the things we talked about was this was going to create a difference between us and the city's accounting procedures. I don't know when it is we have to share information with them, cash basis versus accrual, but do we have a process started to be mapped out about how we'll go about that? And is the city aware that we are actually making this change and so that we will have to have some sort of conversion or interpretation when we do have to give them information? That question makes sense.
Yes, we actually kind of talked about this earlier today. What we would propose is maybe getting Robert in a little earlier this coming fall so that he can get through our financials and get those all completed on the accrual basis. And then that would give us time to get those to the city and he can then perform their audit hopefully after he's gone through ours and kind of bridge that gap between the accrual and the cash basis. Chris actually suggested that this morning that we try to get all of our work done prior to the city's process this coming fall, and hopefully that will help kind of bridge that gap to different.
Is that how it's normal? I don't know, I'm over my skis on this question, but it just feels like we got a mismatch. And so if that's the best way to handle it, great.
Well, then outside of that though, really what the city's looking for is the monthly reports related to your billing and collections on the receivables that you're collecting on behalf of the city. And my assumption is, and correct me, is that you guys have figured out in conjunction with the city what reports they need and are running those and processing those and sending them to the city every month. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct. I think Alicia and Chris have worked out a reconciliation process that is working for the city.
So that's in place right now.
Yes, yes.
So there's really 2 issues. There's, on a monthly basis, there's some reports that occur, but then the bigger issue is year-end reconciliation. So,
All right, thank you.
and Chris, you might as well stay up because I think you're on next.
So what was included in the packet is kind of a summary of all of the detail that I think you all received as well. Kind of the higher level items that went into this budget are the things that we've kind of been talking about for months.
Lou's infrastructure needs, electric wholesale rates, Kurt's fiber installs, all of those things that just keep progressing and rolling along. Those are things that we obviously included in this budget here. Some of the things that are impacting all the departments continue to be supply chain issues and costs of goods and services. Those just continue to
I'm sorry
increase.
to interrupt, but I can't hear anything.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Is that okay? I'll speak more into the mic.
Or you need to move one of
So you might,
these.
yeah, move closer to the.
Should I just sit over there, do you think? Okay. Leslie, is that better?
Oh my gosh, that is awesome.
Okay, okay. I'll just repeat kind of what I said. The document in the packet was kind of a summary of the re-estimated revenues and expenses, and then what we're projecting for fiscal year 23. But we also sent out some detailed sheets for you guys to kind of look at. Things that are included in the budget continue to be, Lou's infrastructure needs, electric wholesale rates, and Kurt's fiber installs. All of those things just kind of keep going and going, and costs keep increasing on those types of things. Things that are impacting all of the departments are supply chain issues and costs of goods and services. Those just continue to increase as well. Something else that's kind of driving that I think we're kind of proud of, and our employees' testing and training and certifications. Lou's department just last week had 3 employees who passed grade certifications, and so that, and Mike's got a couple of apprentices who are getting probably within a year and a half will be journeyed out. So we've included all of those in this budget as well, which all of this, those types of things align with our strategic planning when we talk about succession planning and internal training and promotions and that sort of thing. So that kind of all aligns with that. But those are just kind of some high level, big ticket items. I'm sure you have questions on some other things that are in here, and we can try to answer some of those for you tonight. We'd also like to invite any one of you, or maybe a couple at a time, to come in and schedule some time to sit down and maybe look at this in more detail. If you've got questions on what's in certain line items and how we arrive at those numbers, we'd be happy to do that as well.
So Chris, I know Chris mentioned earlier, a meeting or so ago, that we're anticipating, did you say a 5% bump from Maine?
6%. 6%.
Yeah, and if we can kind of, I'll maybe go a little bit deeper into each one of these utilities. I planned on starting with water.
That's fine. Yeah.
So yeah, like Chris said, in general, I think if you look through that O&M budget, you'll see a pretty normative budget. The 2 items of significance, we did have some salary increases, and that is related to those certifications. So it's great to have a little more qualified and abled and certified folks that are running our water department. That comes at a little bit of a cost, and so you'll note that in there. And in general, on a lot of those construction materials, there is some stress and strain on those funds as far as construction related costs, specifically concrete and people to get in and give us some assistance there. In that water fund, we are funding our water capital to the level that we need this year. Last year we had $400,000 worth of expenditures budgeted. This year was 600, and that 600 number is specifically what right now the city engineers are expecting to get accomplished, or the city construction workers are expected to get accomplished around the streetscape. That did put additional pressure on our rates, and so those couple items led us to on the revenue side
we are going to recommend a rate increase. And I think we did our best to minimize this and make some progress towards those needed infrastructure goals. So specifically, as you look through any of those water rates, the water revenues, we have built in a different rate structure around there. So those funds we've proposing to increase the base rate from $8.75 to $10. And so that's for the first 1,000 gallons. And then raising the marginal rate or the per 1,000 gallon rate over and above that 50 cents. And that will bring it to 6 1/4 per 1,000 gallons. That does generate an extra $260,000 in revenue. Say that again. How much was it? 260. Okay. Yeah, on an annual basis. And so with that, ultimately that $200,000 increase, that $200,000 increase supports, or the $260,000 rate increase supports some of those operational cost increases, as well as because it fully funds a $600,000 water main improvement.
So what timing would we be looking to for the increases?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a little bit up to debate. The revenues used in this, or the dollars used in this, would be a full year. So
you think, ideally, we would start in July and have that be part of our fiscal season?
It's including July. The negatives to increasing those rates in July are, that's a lot of when the summertime water race usage impacts folks. I think we could do that, rate increase. That's, really a discussion on timing. We could do it April or May. It would be nice probably not to do that right in the middle of those increased season, right in the middle of that increased usage.
We're already at the end of February, so April, May seems pretty aggressive.
Typically, if we, my thought was we have by the end of we propose or approve a budget, and that would probably be supportive or wouldn't work with that rate increase. Shortly thereafter, we really need 30 days notice. We hold a public hearing and have that 30-day process work out, and we can, so we can do that as soon as April 1st.
It's really like a 2-meeting process for us, is what we've done in the past for these rates, not water rates, but any rates.
That includes the public hearing.
And I think in that time, outside of just our meeting too, I think there's some other communications with the community that Chris will need to have. But
Yeah,
So you've got it in budget beginning in that cycle.
correct. Yeah, this budget does forecast that, and that it is a relatively, or we sought to minimize any of those rate impacts for our average employee, or our average residential customer, which are, all but a couple of hundred of our water meters. This would be a $3 a month rate increase. So just kind of to quantify what some of the, might be scary to talk rate increases, but for the majority of folks, this would be, around that $3.
and that, so I think you've always sent out that Ames water study of rates and we're not at the bottom, but we're kind of in the lower quartile.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
close to that. And so where would, keeping everybody else the same, where would this increase put us in that list?
So for the base rate, the $10, this is helpful here.
It would move us up 3 positions, out of this 25, city.
Does that move us like more to the average or? does
Yes, yes, more toward the middle. And then like say for our 5,250 customers that would be affected, we'd still be in the lower middle part. And the thing about the Ames rate that you need to take into context too is several of those people that are in the upper half have been in the upper half for years. They raised their rates for one reason or another several years ago to increase their revenue. So we've
What was the last one,
10 years
ago?
Yeah, and we moved up like a couple positions in too. I mean, it's just, and there's like, out of 40 utilities that are in the survey, over 20 of them are gonna raise rates. And if not this year, next year, or the year after. It's a lot of them, multiple years, just because of the economy and they're far behind.
So the meter.
Hey,
fee-
Lou,
Yes,
if you're gonna raise so you're raising or proposing to raise the rate $1.25 per.
for the first 1,000
per
gallons, yep,
1,000?
yep.
What's the average, usage?
The average customer uses between 3,000 and 4,000 gallons. Like say, Leslie, we have 5,600 customers and 5,250 of those customers are in that average. We are a bedroom community. So the average bill is going to go up about $3 a month or $36 a year for the average customer. Now,
Okay.
some people that use less, it's going to be less, but the average customer is right there about $3 a month.
Okay,
And Chris, tell us about on the marginal rate, where does we rank?
We'll back up to just to kind of finish the median base water meter fee, excuse me. That's $11.25. So we're still going to be at $10. We're still going to be substantially under that median. As far as that marginal rate, this teal color here, this is 1,000 cubic feet, and so this is all but 50 of our customers are right here in this range. That puts us with our marginal rate and the marginal increase. That puts us right in the center of the median for a 600 cubic foot, which is probably a good approximation for an average family. And at 1,000 cubic feet, we'd still be right at.
So we're moving from below median to the median.
Yep, yep. At this point in time, now several of those people are going to have increases too, so we might be below the median by the time, it comes around. Sure, sure.
I think that's an important point to make clear to the community when we're talking about how we're going to communicate this.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but so yeah, Lou and I kind of worked hard to balance some of those infrastructure items and some of those areas that you saw, obviously streetscape, and then a couple of those high priority areas. We built that out in the 5-year capital that you guys saw at our last meeting. This doesn't solve all of our problems, but getting closer to those medians does allow us to accomplish a little more, and I think certainly falls in line with that. We're getting important infrastructure improvements done while, like we talked about in our strategic plan, we're still providing very good value to our residents because we're going to be right there in line on water costs and be right at the median or thereabouts.
Right, and we're going to have to come back to later on too. So
And that was exactly my next question is so you've laid this out for the next 5 years. Does your projection then anticipate that there will be additional increases?
yes, yes.
Every year?
Well, no,
No.
that's still in the discussion. We're just, we jump over this hurdle and then we'll run to the next one is what we're thinking, and then get.
I do think though, Adam's right. We may not communicate all of that detail because we don't have it yet, but we want to probably set the stage
You bet, okay.
that we've been reviewing. So we probably need a little bit of.
Yeah, and
information.
in the survey that was put out, several communities had a 3% raise, 5% raise, 3% raise. Some had a 9% raise, 2% raise, out, extended because of the economy and the cost of everything on treatment and infrastructure needs. So it's, I can send you the survey to, to kind of show you, where they're landing and where we think we need to do to.
You or Chris has sent that to us in the past.
Right, and we just got it. We just got it.
Oh, you
So,
got it? Okay.
the upgraded
Yeah.
one. So
That would be good.
Yeah, that would be
we'll
good.
we'll send that out and try to highlight the ones that, have been there and had increases before and that kind of thing. So.
But yeah, I mean, to summarize it, and I guess to be clear what we're talking about here, like I said, this rate increase is necessary to accomplish some of those infrastructure improvements. It doesn't solve them all. And so it likely means in the future, we're going to be having this conversation again. But we are taking, construction environment and a lot of those costs are pretty outrageous right now, to be fair. And if that continues, certainly we'll, need to accommodate. But if some of those back off, we're looking at the situation, but in those future years, I think we're just in an area in time of a little bit unpredictable construction costs. And so we're not quite ready to, put the stamp on what things look like 3 years from now.
And I get that, and I support that. And I know we're focused on really just 1 year's budget at a time, but harkening back to our strategic planning discussion, I think we do need to do that 3 and 5 year plan.
You bet. You bet.
And even if it means, making some guesstimates
Right.
of numbers, there's value in looking longer range.
Right.
I think for the board,
You'll
we
find.
need to be looking longer.
Yeah, you'll find in the survey that several utilities and cities have the to be determined, TBD, on that, just be seeing, playing off the economy. But most of them that had that previously, Adam, have raised the rates because they had that in there for a reason. They needed to keep up.
And we don't need to be making specific commitments now on what the rate changes are going to be 4 and 5 years down the road. But we got to plug the numbers in just to see
You bet.
what it's getting us in terms of the dollar amount that we need to do water main replacements at the dollar level that we talked about in strategic plan.
And keep up with our 24-year-old water treatment facility.
Yep, absolutely.
It's a dual-edged sword there.
Yep. Chris, related question. So I'm just looking at the numbers. You said the increase in the rates is $260,000, but the actual sales is going up just over $400,000. Are we assuming some increased usage too?
Yeah, that's so you'll see this concept also on the electric. We have kind of both the last year we had a dip in usage. That budget and that increase of the $400,000 is attributable to a little bit more of a normalized usage, where we're going to see some of those usage creep up to what is our typical average. And then some additional housings and developments. There's about 120 houses in there, and we kind of quantified that also, is a portion.
So that part makes sense, but the actual usage, we're confident enough to know that the dip in the current year isn't something that's going to carry forward. It really was just an anomaly and it's going to go back up.
Yeah, if you, again, this is our best guess based on history. We have some years that are a little higher and some years that are a little lower, but they all tend to, for the last 10 years, we've kind of reverted to the mean. We could see another sag in some of those usage. It could be a second year in a row where that usage is decreased. And we do have the fund balance to draw into if that is necessary. Our expectations, if it's not next year, it'll be the year after where we see some of that bounce out and renormalize. And so, there are some risk of usage and risk of an increase. But I think we can afford to make it through, got sufficient fund balances in order to still accomplish everything.
And since you're talking about fund balances, so this is slightly different. I'm changing topics on you. and it applies to all the utilities. So in the past, and mainly because of, at my request, you've looked at the level of reserves in comparison to like a benchmark. And I think you benchmarked based on how many months of expenses it is. And at least for water and electric, I think we're better than what the benchmark would indicate. So there is potentially some ability to dip into those reserves to help support some of this water main and water plant upgrades. I think it'd be good to look at that, not necessarily tonight, but look at that before we have to approve this too.
So can I just repeat what I think I heard you say? Is that we've got a base of reserve and we've probably been running higher in the level of account that we have. So we have a little bit of play to put money towards some of this.
Yes.
And not jeopardize what we have.
And not force rate increases to cover everything.
Correct.
I don't remember the benchmarks that you use, but yeah.
We try to keep our hope is between 110 and 120 days. And Chris, do you have those days handy?
I typically put those on the financial reports. Did I include those?
Yep.
Well, that would be for December, but I don't have them updated for current.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did find those. We have currently have 220 days in water. So all of a sudden, pretty solid and sizable reserves for that. Probably want to keep a little bit higher, like 180 days, just because we do have maintenance and emergency repairs, and I'd like to probably add $200,000 just to have one extra emergency tucked away in those reserves. But that does give us a couple $100,000. I think kind of what you're saying is we can be aggressive and lead the construction and let the revenue come in on the back end. And that's certainly, absolutely correct. We can, we do have the financial wherewithal to handle something like that.
Yeah, because you're keeping the reserve levels really fairly flat, which is good, because it used to be that we were kind of steadily declining. But I actually think in this case, to say what you just said a different way, I'm not suggesting necessarily this year, but in our planning, if we're going to we can decrease that fund balance down to around, whatever level that you think is appropriate. I agree with you, having a little bit better than what the base is. I support that. So it's 180 days or whatever it is.
Whatever helps the state.
Right. Yeah, I think we've just said the same thing 3 times. So.
Communication, again, that similar concept in a lot of those materials. Kurt, do you have any other details? We went through this.
Yeah, no, I don't think a ton really changed my mind. I mean, we did factor in all of the potential construction for next year, so that's why some of those numbers look a lot bigger. So
And you're assuming a borrowing, I saw too.
yeah, so yeah. So if those go forward, then obviously those numbers will stick. If they don't, we'll pull back out on those sides. So.
And you estimated interest rates based on what Mike Maloney is suggesting?
He hasn't got me anything back yet or confirmed. We're still talking through the project and the potential, private placements versus the market.
But in terms of the actual debt terms, the interest rate that you would get charged, are you assuming something that's a higher interest rate or
I think we used 4%.
Yeah.
And so probably a little bit of savings we had, but probably not tons.
I guess I anticipated seeing our ending balances going up a little.
We're spending a lot on the project. The wastewater recovery is going to be out of this year, but the expansion on the south, all of our capital outlay is going to be out of that fund balance, and so it kept it pretty flat. But we have, I think, $250,000 in that expansion capital expenditures that are otherwise seen as for. to where it's flat because we're reinvesting it.
Well, and I get that to a certain extent, at the same time, it's still, I mean, to me, that means that we're accepting all this risk. We're putting this money back in there. It almost seems like to me that there should be more from partners that we're helping out by doing this.
You know, with both of those projects and our 5-year payback, you know, with the normalized revenue, we will make that out in the future years. You know, we made that capital investment, but the revenue increases when the county pays for what is their dark fiber, maybe 5 miles.
Yeah, it's gonna be close to that by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah,
Back then.
with all those, so we're gonna have, you know, some revenue that's not in this year. But after that project is done, in the future years, we're gonna have 5 extra miles of dark fiber built on a monthly basis. And we'll see some of the dollars that we're spending on the wastewater recovery. Those will come in on the back end as well in the form of the revenues. This is, you know, on the fiber side, you know, where we're borrowing isn't necessarily those projects. You know, we talked a little bit about that, and we'll have some more details and specifying that borrowing at a later date. But on the county-related expansions, and we're primarily funding that out of cash. And like our installations, where we're not flush with, you know, we're wildly successful, I think, in comparison to the business plan in that communications utility. But that success has meant we have leveraged ourselves in those installation costs more. And while that means future opportunity and future payback, once we've had those, you know, we've had to hire contractors and go through cash in order to install the number of customers that we've installed. You know, that benefits all on the back end. After we have that, you know, every customer that we install is still, you know, $800 to $1,000 in capital cost, which at $64 a month, probably $50 after some marginal expenses, it does take, you know, a period of time to recover that initial capital expenditure. So, you know, again, I think Kurt's done a really good job on maintaining those fund balances. But in this one in particular, he is taking all those excess cash flow, not excess revenue, and reinvesting those into future opportunities in that capital expansion.
Mike, I view that as different than what was initially planned or intended,
Oh, I know that.
but it's growing our customer base, which I think is a good thing. We're reinvesting in that now to have a larger customer base down the road.
And there will be grant dollars too. It's, we're able to do that at a reduced cost, and assuming the state contracts come back the way we think they're going to.
So that would make these balances higher.
No. This
They're
figured into
factored
that,
in.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but it would be much more difficult to do that expansion without those state dollars. So.
No, I just anticipated that our reserves would be growing in spite of that. I know one of the things that, you know, they brought up in our audit also is just our fund balances on that side. And we're told them that's part of our plan. Well, no, we've changed our plan. And so we're probably gonna get beat over the head with that again.
And they're not necessarily looking at just solely our cash position. In our audit, they're looking at our entire net position or net fund balance, which if we take some current revenues and invest those in an asset, that asset will increase our net position. Not quite 100%, there'll be some depreciation out of that, but you know, this project, while it maintains the same amount of cash, our net position will increase because we've invested $250 extra $1,000. And while that certainly is not nearly enough,
Not sitting in the bank.
yeah, precisely, it's in the ground, not sitting in the bank. And while that's not enough, you know, we're currently in a negative few $1 million position. So this $250,000 doesn't necessarily hurt us because we're reinvesting it, but it also is, not a complete deal breaker. And doing this or not doing this doesn't move us from a negative net position to a positive net position. I think it is a good business opportunity, and it will allow us to, once we stop doing those investments, once we stop reinvesting it or putting the money in the ground, it'll help that fund balance increase more at a future date. But that's, like any of those investments, we're spending the money now and hoping for the benefit in the future.
Ready to move on to electric?
So electric, Mike, do you want to kind of start on some of those expenses? I think, we probably need the increased cost thing a little bit. You guys remember?
Yeah, that's really different from what we talked about previously about what our plans were as far as the future 5-year that we discussed. Going from overhead underground, bringing that in-house with more crews and doing that infrastructure in-house. That's kind of the big item out there.
So this electric, you'll see in those expenditures, it does fund that capital improvement plan that we talked about at our last meeting. The big change or the big departure in those budget expenditures, other than some of those construction costs that we talked about previously, is at our last meeting, the January 21st. Me board of directors voted to increase our wholesale rates 6%. So you'll see that 6% rate increase in that wholesale cost.
When is that?
We will start to pay that on our April 1st utility bill. So our first check will cut. That will be at the higher rate. Will be May 1st for April. And so we'll start to see that those increases more than we'd anticipated. And this those wholesale rate increases, that rate increase of 6% is a little bit unexpected in that in November, we were talking about some of the excesses that we have at the mean, and they had a successful year and marketed some of our excess capacity in such a way that we were running $7 million ahead. And so, in November, the talk was, how are we going to spend this money and how are we going to distribute it to the community? December happened, and I think everyone's probably seen it by now. Natural gas rates increased and probably in round numbers doubled. Probably everyone has seen in their heating bills. One of our larger sources of our electricity is fueled by natural gas. It makes up approximately 25% of our portfolio is gas and natural gas fueled sources. And so for a quarter of our portfolio, we're seeing a doubling of that cost. What that equated to, on a larger scale, was that 6% wholesale rate increase that we'll start paying come April 1st. And so for how that relates directly to us is a little bit more complicated. Obviously, the 6% in our wholesale rates don't mean 6% in our retail rates. And so what a 6% rate increase on our retail rates, so just to recover or put us back into the position we were previously, it would take approximately a 3% or to 3.25% rate increase. And so that's the minimum rate increase, I think, necessary to keep us whole from our increase.
So that's when we started at 2.9.
Yeah. So that's where the 2.9 version of that, that is kind of the bare minimum of keeping pace and.
But that doesn't cover the capital improvements.
Correct. So in your packet is also a couple of more versions that to consider. The other one is 3.9%. And that, of course, fully covers all of our increase in the wholesale electric cost and does cover most of those inflationary costs that we saw in our construction projects. So the 3.9% gives us closer to covering the increase in expenditures that we saw from both our wholesale and environmental forces. But as you know, we are looking at doing undergrounding and a lot of undergrounding projects. So our staff recommendation or what's included in that budget currently is a 4.9% rate increase. And that covers that increase in wholesale cost, covers some of the inflationary costs, and gives us about $75,000 extra in capital cost or the ability to fund that some of those capital expenditures in the future. Do you have any thoughts or questions?
What's your rationale for only staying at 4.9 and not going? Not that I'm suggesting that should. I just want to understand what the rationale is. Why it wouldn't be 5.9?
Because right now we do have fund balance necessary to buy some of the equipment to get us up and going. 5.9 is probably a better, long-term number that aligns, but we can afford to defer. This is just kind of being fiscally prudent. We can afford to stick with a 4.9% number. Knowing that in the future, when we have some increased costs in our expenditure, we'll probably be looking at a smaller version of that in the future. But it would be closer to matching. This wouldn't be anticipatory or building any fund reserve to spend them later. Going at 4.9 would be closer to matching those expenses to this is what we need to spend this year. This covers all this year's expenditures and leaves us judgment in the future to say, everything's working out like we'd expected, and we probably are looking at a smaller rate increase, or this is not enough, and make a larger change. Again, this I think it's a prudent number. It's not being overly punitive just to gain fund balance, but directionally gets us in a good position for that undergrounding project in the future.
And we're probably, Mike, are we kind of somewhat limited in how much we can spend next year just because we've got to get materials?
Yeah, just
equipment.
Get equipment, that's what I
Get
meant.
equipment, yeah.
So when are you thinking this increase would go into effect then for our customers?
So, again, that'll kind of be one of the board decision. My input or feedback on that one is we are going to start paying the increased wholesale rates on April 1st. So, if we waited until December, that 4.9%, if we deferred that, that's about $275,000 of reserves that we burned through in order to wait to December. So based upon, knowing that we have the costs and the expenses and they're coming and they're, coming on April 1st, I'd like to match that increase in cost with our increase in rates to cover it, so as not to burn through any reserves. It's certainly something we can consider. There's probably some reason to do it, but there's also, we are at this point that the rates have been decided and we are going to start paying them. We would just be delaying the inevitable.
Is this an annual type of activity from you that happens? Is that their anticipation?
In January, the main board of directors reviews its rates for it's April, it's fiscal year is,
They do it.
yeah, they do it in. It's fiscal year is April 1st to March 31st. And so,
Is it typical that they have an increase?
it hasn't been, it has been 3 years since
They've
we've
given
had
us
it.
money back.
Yeah, in the past 3 years, it's been pretty successful in that we haven't had a rate increase. And in a lot of cases, we've got money back in the form of some various refunds.
Which
So-
is great. Where my head was going is you were talking about being fiscally prudent, which I appreciate, but then I also worry about what risk posture does that place us in if we put off doing a rate increase that probably covers us to a better level, and then in January, we're faced with another increase that they potentially would put in place.
And that certainly is a little bit of a risk. Like I said, I think Adam kind of said it well. We're going to be limited in what we can spend this year as far as we're ramping up and buying the equipment. So I don't think a lesser rate increase is necessarily dangerous because, there is a cap on what we'll buy and what we'll prepare for. And knowing that, the big driver behind here is natural gas. And while right now it really looks like this is probably going to be a 3 to 4 year issue, that's Mean does have a gas portfolio and we're borrowing some of their knowledge and expectations in those Mean futures. Right now, those February gas futures for next year are still pretty escalated, but a lot can happen in that next year, and we are in a bit of an unpredictable natural gas market. And so, even if we did something higher in anticipation, it might not be enough come next, when we're evaluating that gas position with those futures that haven't normalized, and if we see a further increase, we could be faced in the same position and not having accomplished enough. And so a bit of a risk, but I think, it certainly is a balance here.
But because we're not spending money on equipment, so we're gonna be increasing our fund balances, so when those things do come, we'll be able to, in the meantime, we're building that up, is what you're saying.
Right.
And you're, just to, I think what Lori was getting at, you're assuming that next year at the same time, we will need to consider an increase at a minimum to cover whatever rate change that Mean has. And then we'll have the same conversation about, do we do above that increase to continue to build up so that.
Towards that underground.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. We're given the unpredictable nature, I think we've got certainly at 4.9%, we got enough to cover us and make some progress and build some of those reserves before we spend them down. But until the natural gas issue is solved, we're always going to have some unpredictability here. If, God forbid, but if natural gas rates, double again, we'll be having this exact same or maybe even worse conversation next year. But if they do end up normalizing and levelizing, we're talking about a rate increase that we could match directly to the improvement in our infrastructure that we're going to do. So I hope it's that. I hope we're not talking about a second rate increase because of natural gas, but given the timing, I think it would be foolish to not expect to have this similar conversation next year. And so, we can, again, we've got pretty decent reserve. We can afford to match those rate increases or lack thereof directly with the increase in spending rather than anticipating it.
Question, this might not be the right time to ask this, but while we're talking about, increases in underground and our electric infrastructure and so forth, as our country continues to talk more about electric vehicles and those type things, what is that going to mean on stress on our electric infrastructure going forward?
That may be something we've looked at for over 10 years. That what it can 10 years ago, where there was a big push that it's gonna come right now and type of deal. But we did quite a bit of research at the time, what it would do. I think here in the Midwest, we're gonna be a late adopter into it. That's what everybody's feeling as well, especially in the rural areas. It's just because of the batteries and the capacity and the how far we can go, you know.
They talked about patterns of charging, Mike, so.
Yeah, batteries, that's been an option or discussion, you know, if you get it, it depends on what kind of chargers people end up getting. Do they take it home? Do they just use a standard recharge deal, or are they looking for one that they pull in their garage and then 2 hours later, the thing's charged and then go somewhere else? That's when that becomes a bigger problem with our system. And if that implements, then we're gonna have to implement things that we can put people on timers to say, you can charge your vehicle from 6 to 8. Now yours is 8 to 10 or whatever, you know, on certain transformers. So we don't overload those.
Well, that'll be popular.
What's that?
That'll be popular.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say is that may at some point require us to do some different things with transformers.
Transformers, hopefully we can keep the same size, because we really don't want to start going in and replacing all of our transformers just to accommodate that and increase those costs. You know, if we can do it and somehow tie those devices to the system. I mean, with Kurt's fiber system being out there, that's always been the discussion as well. We have connectivity out there to be able to communicate with those devices at some point in time.
Well, that's probably a conversation we want to have for another day, because everybody keeps talking about this stuff, but I see virtually nobody talking about how we're actually going to make this work. And if all of a sudden 50%, and that's an unlikely number, admittedly, 20% of our vehicles in our community are electric vehicles, how are we going to accommodate that? Can we accommodate that?
And that would be, you know, a big increase. You're talking about, you know, mid-July when everyone's air conditioners cranked up and they're arriving home. And in addition to some of those, you know, 5 to 7 peaks that we see, people are probably arriving home between 5 and 7 and plugging in, you know, potentially plugging in a car that is pulling an extra 50 amps. And that would be a tremendous stress on our system. And so that's a little bit of the. But it seems like a simple solution to that would just be a timer on that charger to say, charge between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m.
Yeah, but that's not I'm going to tell you, people are not going to like the idea of saying, okay, yeah, this is when you're going to charge your vehicle. And what if something comes up and you got to go someplace, or there's an emergency comes up, or we have a power outage or something. And I just see, I'm just asking questions. I don't have. But
I think that is one of the things we need to be thinking in our strategy conversations. That's a topic we probably need to spend more time on.
Yeah, it's a tough problem to just tackle without any compromises, Mike. So I think.
no, and like I said, we were kind of talking about infrastructure stuff, and it struck me because I've had those thoughts, and it's a conversation to have another day, because I'd be interested to know kind of what our options might be and how we might go about doing some of the stuff, and if that's the direction that we're going, we need to be ready to move. That's all I got to say about that. Quote Forrest Gump.
And so with that, you know, that's the basis of our electrical budget. IMU admin is a little more boring. Major increases there is our IT staff person, and those costs and IMU admin funds, other than the money that we receive from the city, all the budget and revenues in there come from one of the other 3 funds. And so those expenses have been otherwise covered in electric, water, and communication.
So this time last year, we didn't talk about some of the things we actually did this year. So I'm trying to get ahead of it. Do we anticipate any additional movement of work from one place to another, whether it be from the city to us or us back to the city? Would it cause any additional staff increases? Do we need any additional software? Are we needing any new functionality? Is that in there as well?
we're not, this year, and we're still, working through those conversations from the city, and by all indications, our expectation, their expectations are lined up, and so we don't anticipate any further changes with as far as other resources necessary. We are kind of building out our IT department, and so what is in some of those larger increase in that salary, we're creating and building our computer fund where the IT guys will be able to draw from some of those dollars, about $10,000 to draw from and build up some inventory of parts and supplies and miscellaneous stuff that the average guy or our average IT guy will need in his duties. And so those are between his salary and some of those extra funding mechanisms. I should cover all of our sources, and not large changes. Certainly, we have 35 employees. We got I don't know that we have a good inventory number yet on computers, but we're working through that, and it's not problem solved yet. But with the extra $10,000 in there to fund that computer replacements, we're in a good position. Not, other than the licensing stuff that is been reoccurring, we're not planning on buying anything additional.
Chris, in terms of shared services, just the negotiation and discussion back and forth on the value of those shared services. Discussions that we should be getting charged more than what was there, how was that? Any discussions with the city to look at how those charges are being calculated?
They do, we have, or the interim city manager has asked them to provide a little input. We're readdressing that 28E agreement, and so I haven't done anything with that yet, but I'll probably be reaching out to Adam. I think last time we had this, you had some good comments and stuff to add. I'll probably reach out to you for a little bit of feedback on items you'd like to see in there, and
Because that was before you were in the GM role, wasn't it?
Correct. And so we are taking a fresh look at that agreement, and so I do have some thoughts about.
Because that was actually one of the things that wasn't in the agreement is how the cost of those shared services is getting calculated.
And how often is it reviewed?
And how often is it reviewed? And when during the year is it reviewed? And when does one party have to notify the other they're making changes and things like that? None of that was addressed in the agreement.
Yep, and that's, so we're doing that right now. We have in the budget, we have all the known changes. I do expect some small changes. I was going back and forth with the IT folks. I had some questions, and we've been exchanging emails. We have their expected number in there now. I expect that to drop a little bit as we flush out some details.
And when you say their number, do you understand how their number is being calculated? Are we being
Correct.
I'm hoping that we're transparent.
The city kind of, we'd asked basically for a share of, we removed a lot of the shared service, but we are using the city phone system. We're using the city email system, and there's a couple of other smaller interconnections that we're still going to work together on. Lisa, this is her first go at this budget, and so I think there was some things that she had questions on, and we were able to work out. And I'm not ready to say spike the football and say we're done with that, but we're pretty
there is
close.
communication going back and forth. And
Yeah, absolutely.
you feel like we're being open and transparent both ways?
Yeah, absolutely.
Outstanding.
So when you come to some sort of conclusion or any point to say, I think this is pretty good, will you share that with us?
Yeah, will do. Yeah.
And probably with the council too.
Yeah, I think, might Lisa have any other input to the council, or is,
I don't know.
okay, yeah. I can do that. I can do that in concert with Miley, so we
That'd
can
be
work
great
out
if you
something.
could do it together, because I do think it's important that we at least have an understanding of what's in there and how we are looking at those shared costs.
Yeah, and this was, I mean, with my Lisa being new and she's had to look everything from a fresh, I think it has been, I think it's been rather than rely a lot on here's just a new version of what we did last year, because we've always done that, we're able to say, well, let's kind of tear that up and look at, here's the new structure and what are those interrelationships. And I think my Lisa's learned a lot about her department out of it. And, certainly much further than I think we ever have been. I'm happy with the progress.
A few other questions. Benefits, what did you assume for health insurance rate changes?
Right now, we're using 10% health insurance rate increases. And that's the number that the city,
Is the renewal in July or January?
July.
Just July. Okay.
So
So you're assuming a 10% rate increase in July?
Yep.
And we'll have a review of that again, like we did last year.
Yeah,
with the city.
I think between the city and Holmes Murphy, we'll have that chat.
So have there been any discussions at all about reserve balances and that fund?
That is one of the items. We kind of got we got kind of a preview of some of the input factors. Chris was gone, otherwise she would have been there, but I attended that meeting virtually. Kind of reviewed our past results and what's going to go into those calculations. I certainly have some thoughts.
Has Holmes Murphy gotten renewal quotes yet or still? working on it?
Yeah, they're not there yet. Usually those top out at 60 days out. So we won't have firm numbers until closer to later. So there's still, opportunity for all those discussions. And, I haven't, we're using 10% for anticipated health insurance rate increases.
Which is just for everybody, that's typically what we use.
Yeah, and that's what the city's using. But, given fund balances, there's still a lot of discussion now. And if that 10% needs to be fully materialized or none of it or a portion of it.
And then can you remind us where we are on the union contract? If I recall, did we do a 3-year deal?
We did
Did
a
a 5-year.
5-year deal and we're on the,
I think we'll be going into the 3rd year of that contract, yeah.
And that starts in July as well.
And so that the rate increase was prescribed in there and that's what you built in.
we have 3% cost of living in for this, and that's what we
Did
budgeted.
you do that for non-union also?
Yes.
3%.
So you forwarded the message that Charlie sent with what the city was proposing that they do. Is there any overlap? We've got our contract that we'll have to follow. But is that the question you just asked?
Yeah, no, you're
I'm
You're
trying to-
asking the next question that I was gonna ask.
I'm trying to logically think through, is there anybody that falls outside of that contract that we would think about in the same terms as what was outlined in that?
So they're making some changes to their non-union as well as the police union. There are some overlaps and a lot of intricacies. I think that is one of the things that we like to, as we talk about this meeting, if we could get an hour of your time and go through some of the details. There's a lot of intricacies to that thought process, and it's probably better if Chris and I can kind of, go up with on the whiteboard and start with arrows and question marks.
I just, as I was reading that message, I just wasn't sure how much of that, it was good information, but how much of that would apply to IMU. So that's really what I'm trying to get at.
How much does it have to apply, or how much?
Right.
None of
I
it
just
has
didn't
to
know,
apply.
I didn't know how much of it we were covered within contract. So you're bound.
Yeah, our contracts are separate, so none of it has to be handled separately. The question that we'll pose is their thoughts, or you guys want to do something.
Because the city didn't do a 5-year union contract, right? I think you renegotiated.
I don't know. The contract that prompted this is with the police, which wasn't a 5-year. I
Those are
think that-
separate, so each
yeah.
each of their labor groups have separate contracts.
Correct. So this one was specifically police, but not necessarily. So there are certainly thoughts and details and a little bit of advice from you guys that we want to share and solicit some feedback, because this, we have 3% throughout because that's what the cost of living is, but our contracted union and non-union follows typically, but
Because the other thing that Charlie indicated that they were doing is doing a salary study, and I wondered if there would be value for us to do that too.
I think there.
that's
And was that
driven
a
more by-
broad sweep study or just on certain?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I think it's probably driven by the police salaries, but if I had to guess, they're applying it across the board. They're looking at it for all not employees.
In anticipation, and one of the things, we're hoping with, potential savings in health and insurance, we can, still within our current budget, that we can afford to do a similar.
Assuming it's not gonna be 10%.
Correct. Yeah, if there's some.
You would have some flexibility to do more.
Well, more from 3 or even a little more detailed salary study, throw that in there in anticipation. So, that is one of the, certainly a lot of questions being answered, and we'd like your feedback in. So, a lot can go on.
So let's talk about that. Is your intention that our next meeting in a couple of weeks is when we're gonna approve the budget? Because that's when the hearing is, right?
Yep, we got the hearing scheduled, so we would have to approve a budget. Now, it's certainly, we can amend it if we have changes or thoughts in the future, but, at least for a start, we'll have to approve a budget on the 28th in order for that to get applied in the city budgets. Any thoughts you have after that or outside of that, we accomplish through a budget amendment if necessary.
And set that aside, I get that, but in the meantime, it sounds like you'd like to dig in a little bit deeper on a couple of these issues in a separate meeting. So that needs to occur within the next 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. Well, no, and we were, for these, like we had previously, if, Chris and I could be in the office, if you wanted to come in and do that in person, it'd be great. Just one or possibly 2 people at a time. We don't want any meeting concerns or quorum concerns.
So you're not looking for a meeting of all of us, kind of a subgroup.
Yeah.
To give input on budget.
Yeah, a little individual feedback and put on the budget.
Any comments or questions on that?
Maybe Deb and I can meet with them and see.
Okay. I like that she's already volunteering.
I caught that. I learned from Mr. White.
Okay, good discussion on budget. Anything else? Questions, concerns?
Not related to budget, but in the newsletter, we talked about seeing, make the slate of the next or upcoming topics. Have you got to share at some point?
But you said that you did
Did you
something.
send it?
Yeah,
See, I was at the old meeting too.
I can resend that out, and it is probably last week we made some modifications to it, and so I can send out a new
So
updated version
who
of it.
reviews that before it goes to publish?
Who reviews that?
The newsletter that's ready to draft? Is that
The-
your review or is it somebody else?
I review it and review portions of it. Alicia and her group did, they were having a story on budget billing, and so they had a
I
lot of
think it's
feedback on
great.
that.
I love the newsletter. It felt like some of the information in the last one, and maybe even in the water one, had information that maybe we hadn't really finalized yet.
Kind of got out ahead of us.
Yeah, and so I'm all about sharing, and I think that's great, but I feel like there were things in this last one that maybe we hadn't decided yet before it goes out. Does that make sense? Did you guys think that, or was that just me too?
The one, I don't know that I've read the most recent one. But the one
It just came out. Didn't the new one just come out?
Yeah, I think it's
Did I just get an email last week or so?
Yeah.
I don't think I read that one yet, but
So I just want to make sure that when we do put information in it, that it is our go forward information and not maybe some of our working kind of conversation. That's kind of how it felt, I thought.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and Lori, I'm gonna chime in a little bit on that too. It was the last sentence that I think is what kind of, what you're saying, that all of this was gonna happen, as soon as the board voted. And that bothered me.
Because it almost assumed that we were going to just vote what was in there and not have any concern or disagreement.
Yeah. And I felt like, well, what if we had decided not to do any of that, and yet it had been publicized to the community that we were doing this prior to the board voting?
Again, I think sharing information is great. I just would like us to have an eye on, has that been finalized yet? And if it's something that we've been thinking, these are conversations that we've been brainstorming, that's one thing. But to think that that we'll move ahead with it without really doing that concerns me. So that's what I was trying to say.
Okay, well, I'll certainly, I can share with you the next month's version of that.
And I don't necessarily want to read it. I mean, I'm not saying I need to prove it. I just want to make sure that whoever is doing it, is looking at it with the lens of have those things that ratified or voted on.
And some of those, in hopes to be timely and bring that up from the community, we're dealing with the, one that was finalized today or yesterday that'll go out in, another 2 weeks. We're kind of anticipating what's going to happen in those next 2 weeks as well. And so it's a different.
Anticipating bites of something. And so it hasn't necessarily yet, but that was one of the things that I just was concerned about.
I agree, Lori.
That was the only other topic I had.
anything else from anybody? Any other business to consider? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion, the second, all those in favor?
Eyes.
We are adjourned.
Aye.
We're gonna have to hold Deb on the back of her coat to hold her in
I'm
here.
surprised she lasted
Those
this long.
usually, although we
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good night, Leslie.